SANDHAN, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.
Hello viewers, I am Sneha Pandya from MD Science Institute, Ahmedabad, and with me Piyush Pandya. He is from Gujarat Arts and Science College. Today's talk is about the introduction to scale up. As we know that the topic is about the scale up of industrial fermentation processes, and for the successful development of any commercial process, this particular segment scale up is very important, and we should be having some background about how the process is scaled up and is operated at commercial level on a grand scale, on a big scale, so that you will have some idea after completing your study. When you go to the industry, you will be able to understand how the fermentation processes are actually being operated at commercial level. So today's title is Introduction to Scale Up. I would like to highlight that we are simply talking about the introduction to scale up, and we are not considering all the details, how the different parameters are studied, how they are calculated, and how actually they are implemented on large scale. Simply we have tried to cover the basic aspects that an undergraduate student should know about scale up. Now, as you can see in the first slide, introduction, there are some questions. What is scale up? Why is it required? And what is its importance? Now, as you know that microbial fermentation processes where different industrially important microorganisms are exploited to get economically important product. You know that these processes are not the instant processes. They are having some definite components, and the processes are developed stage wise. And all fermentation processes initially they start at laboratory level. We may not think of conducting the fermentation process directly at industrial level, even though all the details are known about the process. So the first point is to remember and know very clearly that all fermentation processes begin initially at research laboratory level, and if it is found successful, all the expected type of the results are obtained, then and then only the process ends at commercial level. There are many examples of the fermentation processes that have been found very satisfactorily and fruitful at laboratory level, even at pilot scale level, that is small scale level, but unfortunately because of the unsuccessful scale up, these processes have been dropped and they have not been conducted at the commercial scale or the grand scale. Because when we talk about the scale, and as I told you, initially the process starts at laboratory level, you know that it is very comparatively, it is easy to control all the required parameters at laboratory level, because you know that microbial fermentation processes make use of the microorganisms, and we know that all the optimum conditions we have to provide, and it is actually the controlled environment that has been imposed onto the microorganisms. And in this controlled environment, which is physically, biologically and chemically controlled environment, we hope that the organisms produce the required product, required quality as well as quantity of the product in the expected limit of time. Time factor is also very important, and this is the reason why we have to provide all the optimum conditions, and These optimum conditions are standardized at laboratory level. So studies, they start at laboratory level, where we are dealing with either the small shake flask or the small laboratory fermenters. If found successful, then we go to the higher stage, which is the pilot plant or the pilot scale process, and then finally the process is transferred onto the grand scale or the production scale, commercial scale. Now, studies have shown that there are many problems likely to occur during this transfer of the fermentation processes from one scale to the other. That is, when the fermentation processes are transferred from laboratory scale to pilot scale and pilot scale to the grand scale, many different types of the problems are likely to occur, and so it is the job of the fermentation technologist to see that the successful scale up is achieved. And I would say that the fermentation processes which can be scaled up without any problem is a rarity. So we have to be prepared to face different types of the problems when the scale of the operation changes, especially when we go from the smaller scale to the larger scale. Now, preliminary process trials are studied, or they are normally conducted on a small scale in the laboratory using the very small quantity of the medium. Quantity of the medium would be in terms of ml, say it would be rather 100 ml or 1000 ml of the medium. Quantity, volume of the medium is comparatively very low, whereas when the scale increases on the higher scale, pilot scale studies make use of several 100 liters of the medium, and on the grand scale, last stage, production scale, still higher volumes, quantities of the media are used. And as the quantity of the medium increases, it becomes more and more difficult to achieve and maintain the required optimum set of conditions. And it would not be possible to transfer all the informations that we have got from the laboratory scale. Successful laboratory studies, whatever information we have get from such studies, it is not possible to transfer all this information in a single step to the grand scale. And so, scale up is the process which is carried out or which is covering several stages. Scale up is carried out covering several stages, where some of the stages are there at laboratory, as well as there are some stages at small scale, and then only the process is finally conducted, or finally it is transferred to the large scale process. Now, it is very important for any fermentation industry that carries out the fermentation processes at commercial scale to employ the individuals, experts, persons who are expert in the studies of scale up. So, scientists and technologists are employed by the individual fermentation industry, and these are having expertise in the studies of scale up. Such industries, they are also having the facility for pilot scale fermentations, where the scale up studies are carried out in detail. Now, failure to scale up process in most efficient manner, and that too within the short time, because in any fermentation process time factor is very important. So, it is expected that the process of the scale up should be efficient and should be finished within the defined period of time. And if this is not achieved, that is, if the scale up process faces failure, in that case it would result into the wastage of money, time and efforts. So, what is important is to apply all the information and the ideas so that the failure is not faced. Otherwise, it would result into the wastage of time, wastage of effort, wastage of media, and sometimes it can even result into the abandonment of a potentially successful project. Many, as I have already told earlier, that many processes have been dropped because of the failure, because of the successful, because they could not be transformed successfully from the lower scale to the higher scale. And you know that fermentation industry is a multidisciplinary industry. It requires help from the experts from different disciplines, and obviously to make the scale up process successful, it requires help from the different disciplines, experts from the different disciplines. That is, only microbiologist cannot solve the purpose. He requires help from a chemist, biochemist, chemical engineering, cost accountants, etc. And so all the fermentation industries, they are having this set of facilities, and they are having experts from the different disciplines, and they have a good coordination between the experts from different disciplines, and these combined efforts of all of them finally result into the successful scale up of the process. Now, as we know scale up as general, that the attempts are made so that whatever results are obtained at small scale, they are replicated at grand scale. That is, it is expected that without making any change, the entire set of information is transferred from small scale to large scale. This is from the strictly scientific viewpoint. So it is hoped that all these information will work efficiently even at the grand scale. But actually, when this is put in practice, small modifications are required to made. But in any case, scale up would be considered successful if one get similar type of the yield, that is expected yield, in the expected time limit, and in this case, if some minor modifications are to be made which are not significantly affecting the cost of the product, then they can be simply ignored, and in this case achieving the expected yield in the expected period of time would make the process, scale up process, successful. So today today I have tried to give you an overview that what a scale up process is and what are the different types of the problems that might be faced, and we are also going to cover the basic ways how these problems can be solved, how the solutions may be provided, so that finally it results into the successful scale up and the process is conducted on the large scale. Now, in the next slide, we have tried to cover some of the basics of the fermentation process, and about these basics, I would request Piyush to continue.
Like you have already been told, the industrial production programs are primarily carried out at the laboratory scale, at the laboratory level. As the students of microbiology, especially those who have already been addressing the paper of industrial microbiology, should be aware of the fact that the first thing we have to do is to screen out an efficient organism which will be able to give a satisfactory level of the yield production. The yield in which we are interested has to be produced very optimally by the screened out organism. And what we normally, as a beginning of the industrial process, what we normally expect is that the organism that we have successfully isolated, the organism which has started working very efficiently at the level of laboratory, should be able to replicate the capacity to produce the desired yield in extraordinarily large amount, even when we employ the same organism at the level of industrial production of the product in which we are interested. Now, basically, we have to remember the fact that in laboratory studies, when we are optimizing the overall process of industrial production of a particular, maybe antibiotic, maybe an organic acid, or whatever kind of yield that we are hoping to put into market. At the level of laboratory studies, we are optimizing the overall conditions considering only a few milliliter of the volume, because you have already been told here that we are making use of the Erlenmeyer flasks containing only a few hundred at the maximum milliliters of the laboratory medium in which the organisms would be growing. Now, within this particular set of environment, the medium and the surrounding conditions that we offer to the microorganism, we are optimizing everything. And when we have to think about the industrial development, the transfer of this information to the industrial level would be nothing less than a quantum leap. ગુજરાતીમાં આપણે જેને હનુમાન ફાળ કહીએ છીએ, હનુમાન કૂદકો, આ એવું થઈ જાય. Only a few milliliter, few hundred milliliters maybe, the conditions are optimized. The organism has been habituated, it has been trained to behave very optimally, it has been trained to behave in a manner which we desire it would be. And then when we transfer these particular microorganism to many thousand gallons of the laboratory medium in a huge tank as big as a 5-story building. I hope you have seen the industrial fermenters and you are aware of the size of the industrial fermenter. This particular slide shows you on your right hand side a photograph of an industrial tank which houses nothing less than many thousand liters of the laboratory culture medium in which the microorganisms have to grow. So, this quantum leap from a small Erlenmeyer flask to a huge